Hello, everyone. My name is Leila Miller, and I am someone who hopefully is in your corner most of the time, all of the time. I am the editor of Primal, the Now Adult Children of Divorce Speak, and also kind of a follow-up book called Impossible Marriages Redeemed. They didn't end the story in the middle, and that book actually contains 15 stories at the end in its own special section on standers, or people who will stay faithful to their vows even when the other person doesn't, or even when it appears that marriage is beyond hope and there's been a separation, either a physical one only or a legal one or a legal divorce. But those of you who stand for your vows, I have 15 of those stories in my second book. And they're stories that aren't told, and they need to be told. So I'm very, very grateful for all of you for what you're doing and the stand that you're taking for your sacred promises. I want to just encourage you. This is an uncommon heroism in the church today. It is something that is mocked, as you know. It is something that is not held up as even possible, much less virtuous or smart. You get patted on the head and you're told that you're basically foolish for not moving on and finding other partners and having the romance that you deserve and all of that. I want to approach this very, very small talk I want to approach it under the umbrella of the idea that we want to think and stay within the mind of the Holy Catholic Church. So what we've done these days is we've strayed from the mind of the church, and we don't think as Christ thinks. But we have a patrimony that goes back 2,000 years, and we know that Christ had a certain law, a certain purpose, a certain beauty and created order for marriage. And so as long as we're thinking with the mind of the church, it's okay if everyone else is deriding us or suspicious of us or mocking us or making fun of us. So this is where I want to start. I want you to hear the mind of the church on standing for your vow. And I'm going to read you a couple of things, but it just shows you that this has never really changed. This is from Pope Leo the 13th, and he spoke about situations in marriages which are just untenable. They just cannot hold. So he says, and this is in 1880, and all he is doing is echoing the understanding of the church throughout the centuries. He said, "When indeed matters have come to such a pitch that it seems impossible for spouses to live together any longer, then the church allows them to live apart and strives at the same time to soften the evils of this separation by such remedies and helps as are suited to their condition. Yet," and this is the important part, "yet she never ceases to endeavor to bring about a reconciliation and never despairs of doing so." Now, that was written in 1880. That was in our canon, if I'm pronouncing that right. Again, Pope Leo the 13th. That is so far afield from where we are now, as you all know, as you all can sense and live out daily in your lives. The idea that when things, either by abandonment of a spouse or by some horrible situation of danger, addiction, abuse, whatever it is, when a married couple cannot stay together, that doesn't mean that everyone gets to just go their merry way and find a new partner. It doesn't mean we just go off and get an annulment, which we know in America is very easy to attain, even if it takes a few months or a couple of years. And we won't get into the whole annulment issue, other than to say what you're doing is so countercultural within the church. And yet it's what the church has asked. It's what Christ is asking. So you are very rare witnesses to the truth of the mind of Christ, of the mind of the church. That does not change. Christ is the same today, yesterday, and forever. So, as I've written about before, that almost sounds like a fairy tale. Like, what? We stand for the vow and we just wait and we just pray and we stay faithful, even if the other person isn't faithful, even if we're not together. But yes, that's how it always was. That's how it should be. Canon law today says as much. It says the same thing. It says that as soon, Physical separation may be necessary, sometimes because of abandonment. I'm sure many of you have been abandoned. It's not your fault that there's a separation. And yet, canon law says whenever the reasons for that separation are removed, the conjugal living must be restored in all cases. So again, the mind of the church is the same. It's the same as it was in the 1880s. It's the same as it is today in canon law. There's this idea, that civil divorce ends a marriage. We know that that's not true. We can never adopt that mentality as Catholics, and yet most Catholics have that mentality. They're like, well, if it's gone through a civil divorce, then something's changed fundamentally. And it absolutely has not changed. And so anything dating or anything that's going on after that is adultery. That's not heard. We don't hear that a lot. We just hear, well, get your annulment and then you can marry the guy you're dating or marry the girl you're dating. That's not the mind of the church. So, and we assume also, and this is another really big trap, we assume that, and by we I mean Catholics today in America in this culture, assume that if a marriage went wrong or if a marriage was bad and it turned, to the point where you can't live with the other spouse for some terrible reason or because someone has abandoned the other spouse, we tend to think today that, well, that means that the marriage wasn't valid, because valid marriages certainly always work. They're good. They don't have extreme suffering. And of course, that's an absolute lie from the devil, from the pit of hell. So I want to read you something that we, again, all used to know, and this was the mind of the church always. And in fact, at one of my children's most recent weddings, my son got married a year and a half ago, the priest, we had him, the couple had him read what used to be read at every Catholic marriage prior to the 1960s, which is called the Exhortation Before Marriage. And that, all of you, if you have not read it, it's absolutely stunning. Please do go and find that online. Again, it's called the Exhortation Before Marriage. This is one of the paragraphs. This union, then, is most serious because it will bind you together for life in a relationship so close and so intimate that it will profoundly influence your whole future. That future, with its hopes and disappointments, its successes and its failures, its pleasures and its pains, its joys and its sorrows, is hidden from your eyes. You know that these elements are mingled in every life and are expected in your own. And so, not knowing what is before you, you take each other for better or for worse, for richer or for poorer, in sickness and in health, until death. So in other words, we don't know what awaits us when we make those vows. We don't know. We don't know. And it could end up in a situation such as your own, where there is no faithfulness on one side, but on your side, you've taken that vow, you've made that sacred promise, and it holds. There is nothing that changes your vow. For better, for worse, for richer, for poor, in sickness and in health, until death. That is a Christ-like way of loving. I have a priest friend who, when I started doing the work against divorce and against moving on, I really told him that my heart breaks for the abandoned spouses. And he said, oh yes, Christ is the ultimate abandoned spouse. And I said, yeah, you're right. My gosh, Christ is just like an abandoned spouse. And he said, no, Leila, I said that Christ is the abandoned spouse. Like, he's not like an abandoned spouse. He is an abandoned spouse. And everything we throw at our spouse, the church, the church, infidelity, and we abuse him. We are horrible to him. We sin against him constantly. We are unfaithful. We are an unfaithful people. We are an unfaithful bride. And yet he has remained faithful to his promise unto death. Death, to the last drop of his blood he gave up for his bride. So he is the abandoned spouse. He is the model for what Christ-like love looks like. And that is what we show our children too. And I say we, I'm talking about generically. I am not a product of a divorce. I do have a daughter who's going through a very horrible situation of separation, and she's living by these words that we made, we live in a Christ-like way until the last breath. We remain faithful. And so it's painful. It's like Christ on the cross. It is not the picture of frolicking in a field of lilies and just having joy and emotional fulfillment and romance constantly. No, it's a cross, and every last drop of blood has to be out of us before we die. And so then we die, but we have died faithful to our vows. And that's what makes saints. Obviously, if you're asked to carry this cross by God, that is your path to sainthood. This life is very fleeting. We have to keep that in mind. But the voices come and they tell us that we are wrong and stupid and dumb. And the saddest of all is that those voices come from within our church, because people don't know better, and even priests and therapists don't know any better. So it is up to you as the standers, as the ones who give this witness to the world, to stay strong, to support each other, to know without doubt that you are doing this because Christ asks this of you, not because it's fun or you're trying to be martyrs for the sake of being martyrs. And you are doing this and you will get no thanks for it. I will say this, it is a shame that the Catholic community does not see you as heroic as you are, as the witnesses. I want to read what you probably already have seen and you already know from St. John Paul II, the Familiaris Consortio encyclical, number 83. And I hope you don't mind that I read the whole thing. Maybe someone else has brought this up already in your retreat, and maybe you've read it 1,000 times, but I think it's worth reading in its entirety. Number 83, various reasons can unfortunately lead to the often irreparable breakdown of valid marriages. These include mutual lack of understanding and the inability to enter into interpersonal relationships. Obviously, separation must be considered as a last resort, after all other reasonable attempts at reconciliation have proved vain. Loneliness and other difficulties are often the lot of separated spouses, especially when they are the innocent parties. The ecclesial community must support such people more than ever. It must give them much respect, solidarity, understanding, and practical help so that they can preserve their fidelity even in their difficult situation. And it must help them to cultivate the need to forgive, which is inherent in Christian love, the need to forgive, and to be ready perhaps to return to their former married life. The situation is similar for people who have undergone divorce, but being well aware that the valid marriage bond is indissoluble, refrain from becoming involved in a new union and devote themselves solely to carrying out their family duties and the responsibilities of Christian life. In such cases, their example, that's your example, of fidelity and Christian consistency takes on a particular value as a witness before the world and the church. Here it is even more necessary for the church to offer continual love and assistance without there being any obstacle to admission to the sacraments. And so I just want to say to you, as someone who was not aware of the plight of standers, never gave much thought to it, or abandoned spouses, I apologize on behalf of the entire church. There are many people who wish to support you. Many people don't even know you're out there. I want to thank you. God sees all. He sees it. You have each other. You have the Lord. You have the Blessed Mother and all the saints. And they are with you. And I am with you. Everyone who understands the mind of the church is with you. And so I just ask you to be encouraged, and please know that you are uniquely carrying out the mind of the church and the mission of Christ simply by being a stander for your vow and for being a witness of Christ as the abandoned spouse. And that's a witness to the world that will save souls. It will help your children. It will help your grandchildren. It will help the communities around you. Even as you might be mocked, you may think it is just not seen, or it's not important. Grace abounds in what you're doing, and you have to trust that that is the case. Trust God that this is a huge witness that will have eternal consequences, not only for you and your families, but for the people around you, for the church in general, and for the world. And so I just want to encourage you and thank you. Thank you for your witness. I'm in awe of what you do every day. And I just know that God's blessing you for your choices to stay faithful when the rest of the world would quickly run to a new romance and move on. Thank you for not moving on. Thank you for being faithful to your sacred promises and being Christ-like in this world. And may God continue to bless you and keep you strong.